The stampede came out of the dark like the earth itself had turned against them. Cole Merrick heard it before he saw it. That low, awful drum beneath the plains, the sound of 2,000 steers deciding all at once that they were done being cattle and had become something older, something with only one direction and no thought at all. He was in his saddle before he was fully awake, boots half shoved into stirrups, the taste of cold coffee still on his tongue and the memory of his own laughter still in his throat from a joke Micah had told an hour before. There had been 6 of them around that fire. 6 good men. Cole had known 5 of them since he was a boy in Bent County, and the 6th, young Tobias, he had trained himself, taught to rope, taught to whistle a horse home in a storm. By dawn, he was the only one left alive. He did not remember getting thrown. He remembered the sky rolling over him like a wheel. He remembered a hoof coming down close enough to his cheek that he felt the wind of it. He remembered Micah shouting his name from somewhere he could not see, and then the shouting stopping in a way that shouting does not usually stop. When the world was quiet again, Cole lay in the churned red mud of the Prairie River bottom with his left leg bent under him in a shape it was not supposed to bend, and he understood that he was going to die there. He was 34 years old. He had promised his mother, before the war, that he would come home someday and build her a porch. He had not built it yet. He thought about that for a long time, staring at the sky lightening over the Colorado grass, and then he stopped thinking about anything at all. He did not hear the children come. Before we go any further, settle in wherever you are tonight. Let us know in the comments where you're listening from. Whether it's a kitchen in Kentucky or a farmhouse in Queensland or a little apartment in Manchester, we love knowing who's out there with us. Pull the blanket up. This one is worth staying for. The oldest of them was a girl named Sarah Beth, 12 years old, thin as a fence rail, with a jaw set harder than any child's jaw ought to be. Behind her came her brother Isaac, who was 10, and then the twins Ruth and Naomi, who were 8 and did everything as one person. Behind them came little John, 5, who still sucked his thumb when he thought no one was looking, and last of all baby Ellie, 3 years old, riding on Sarah Beth's hip because her legs had given out an hour back. They had been walking for 4 days. Their farm had burned on a Tuesday. A man named Silas Ford, who owned most of the county now and wanted the rest, had sent 3 riders to convince their father to sell. Their father had said no. Their father had said no again when the riders came back the next week with a paper already signed in a hand that was not his. On the 3rd visit, the riders did not bring paper. They brought kerosene. Sarah Beth had pulled the little ones from the root cellar the next morning while the beams still smoked, and she had counted heads, and she had understood in a way children are not supposed to understand that no one was coming for them. So they walked west, because west was where their mother's sister was said to live, in a town called Trinidad, though Sarah Beth had never seen a map and only knew it was somewhere past the second river. They found the Cowboy on the second river. Sarah Beth saw the boot first, sticking up out of the mud like something planted. She thought he was dead. She almost walked the little ones past him. Then his hand moved, just the fingers, a slow closing, like a man reaching for something in a dream, and she stopped so hard that Ellie almost slid off her hip. "Isaac," she said. "Water." They had a tin cup and a canteen half full. Isaac poured a little into the cup, and Sarah Beth held it to the Cowboy's cracked mouth and tipped it in a drop at a time, the way she had watched her mother do for their father the winter the fever came. The Cowboy's throat worked. His eyes opened, gray as old iron, and they found her face and stayed there. "You are not," he said, "an angel." "No, sir," Sarah Beth said. "Good," he said. "I was worried." Then he passed out again, and Sarah Beth sat back on her heels and looked at her brothers and sisters, and she understood that the walking was over now, and something else had begun. They could not move him. His leg was broken so plainly that even little John, staring, said, "That ain't right." So they built the world around him instead. Isaac dragged branches from the willow thicket, and Sarah Beth wove a low windbreak the way her father had once shown her, and the twins gathered every dry thing that would burn, and little John was given the job of holding baby Ellie's hand so she would not wander into the river, and he took the job with the terrible seriousness of a boy who had just been given his first true responsibility. When the fire was going, Sarah Beth cut the Cowboy's trouser leg open with the small paring knife she carried in her apron pocket, and she looked at the break, and her stomach turned over once, and then she settled it, because there was no one else to settle it for her. "Isaac," she said, "I need 2 straight sticks." long as my arm, and every strip of cloth you can spare from the wagon blanket. They set the leg by firelight. The cowboy came awake for the worst of it, and he did not scream, though Sarah Beth saw the tendons in his neck stand out like ropes, and she saw his teeth bite down on the leather of his own belt until the belt tore. When it was done, he lay back and looked up at her with those gray eyes gone bright with pain, and he said, very quietly, "Girl, what is your name?" "Sarah Beth Halloran." "Sarah Beth Halloran," he said, as if he were writing it somewhere he did not intend to lose. "I owe you my leg. Maybe the rest of me too. I do not forget debts." "You don't owe us nothing," she said. "We just found you." "Being found," he said, "is not nothing." He slept then, and she sat by the fire with baby Ellie asleep in her lap and little John's head against her shoulder, and for the first time in 4 days she let herself cry, quietly, so the little ones would not hear. The next morning he was burning with fever. The morning after that, he was worse. Sarah Beth boiled willow bark the way her mother had, and she pressed cool river cloths to his forehead, and on the third night, when she was sure he was going to die and leave them again, he opened his eyes and asked for his saddlebag. Isaac dragged it over. Inside was a folded oilcloth, and inside that was a small tintype of a woman in a plain dark dress, and a letter, and 11 silver dollars, and a folded map with a place circled in pencil. "That circle," Cole said. "That is my mother's place. 2 days' ride north. There is a woman there who was to be my wife once. Her name is Hannah Prine. If I do not live, you take that map, and you go to her, and you tell her Cole Merrick sent you, and you tell her what happened, and she will not turn you out. Do you understand?" "You are going to live," Sarah Beth said. "Girl," he said, "I am asking. And I am telling you," she said. "You are going to live. Because I did not carry 6 children across 2 rivers to bury a 7th. He looked at her for a long moment. Then, very faintly, he smiled. It was the first smile she had seen on his face, and it changed him. It made him younger. It made him someone a person could love. "Yes, ma'am," he said, and he closed his eyes and slept, and the fever broke that night. I want you to stop for a moment and think about that girl. 12 years old, 6 mouths behind her, and a dying stranger in front of her, and no adult within 40 miles. What would you have done in her place? Would you have kept walking? Would you have stopped? Tell me in the comments. I mean it. I want to know. They stayed by the river 8 days. Cole taught Isaac how to set a snare and how to read the shape of a rabbit's run in the grass. He taught the twins how to whistle through a blade of river reed. He taught little John how to whittle, and little John produced, after 3 days of quiet frowning concentration, a small lopsided horse that he presented to Cole with a face solemn as a preacher's, and Cole received it with the same face, and put it in his shirt pocket over his heart, where it stayed. On the 9th day, he could sit a horse if Sarah Beth walked beside him and steadied his knee. His own horse had come wandering back on the 4th morning, dragging a broken rein, which Cole took as a sign from the god he had mostly stopped speaking to. They loaded what they had onto the saddle, and they walked north, 7 of them and 1 gray gelding, moving slower than any wagon train had ever moved on that plain. He asked, on the 2nd night of walking, about their father. Sarah Beth told him. She told him about the paper and the kerosene and the beams still smoking. She told him the name Silas Ford, and she watched something happen in Cole Merrick's face that she would remember for the rest of her life. It was not anger exactly. Anger is loud. This was the opposite of loud. This was a door closing very quietly in a very deep room. "Silas Ford," he said. "You know him?" "I know his kind," Cole said. "I have been running his cattle for 6 years. I did not know he was burning children out of their homes to get more grass. I know it now. He did not say what he intended to do. He did not need to." Sarah Beth had seen her father's face on the day the 2nd riders came. This was not that face. This was a colder face. This was the face of a man who had lost every friend he had in the world in a single night and had, in the days since, found 6 reasons to keep walking. They came to his mother's place on the 14th day. It was a low sodden timber house against a hill, with a windmill turning slow in the afternoon light and a woman splitting kindling in the yard. She looked up when the horse came over the ridge, and she went very still, and then she dropped the axe and she ran. Her name was Hannah Prine. She was 30 years old, and she had waited 7 years for Cole Merrick to come back from a war he had already come back from, and then to come back from the trail he kept riding instead of coming home. She reached him and took his face in her 2 hands and looked at him and said, "You are late, Cole. I know it, he said. You are also alive. I know that too. And these, she said, looking past him, are yours now. Yes, Cole said. They are. She turned to Sarah Beth, and she held out her hand. And Sarah Beth, 12 years old, 4 days of walking and 8 days of nursing and 14 days of leading a dying man across the country, all catching up with her at once, took the hand and did not let go. Cole's mother, Adeline Merrick, was 64 years old and had buried a husband and 2 sons and had, by all accounts, been waiting to die on her own porch for the better part of a decade. When 6 children walked into her kitchen behind her surviving son, she stood up from her chair and she said, "Well," and then she said, "Sarah Beth, honey, come help me with the biscuits. The twins can shell the peas, and Isaac, you go with Cole and see to that horse. Little John, that baby needs a bath, and you are going to help me give her one." By supper they were a household. If this story is settling something in you tonight, if you're feeling what I hoped you'd feel, a like and a subscribe tells me to keep telling stories like this one. That's all it takes. Now come back with me, because we are not done. Silas Ford came on a Sunday afternoon. He brought 8 men, which Cole counted through the window without moving the curtain. Silas himself sat his horse in the yard, a heavy man in a good coat, and he called out in the easy voice of a man who has never been told no in a way that stuck. "Cole Merrick, I hear you've taken in some strays. I have paper on those children. Their father owed me. That debt passes to them. Send them out, and we'll settle it civil." Cole came out onto the porch alone. He was walking with a cane cut from a hickory branch. His leg had healed crooked and would always heal crooked. He did not look like a man in a position to argue. Silas Ford smiled, the way a man smiles when a thing is going to be easy. "Mr. Ford," Cole said, and his voice was so quiet the riders had to lean to hear it. "You burned a house with a man in it. You sent riders to hurry children off land you had no right to. And now you have come to my mother's yard with 8 guns to collect what you call a debt. Legal paper, Merrick. I have seen your paper." Sarah Beth brought it out of the root cellar. It is signed in a hand that is not her father's, and the witness is a man who was in Kansas that week. "I sent a rider to Trinidad 10 days ago. The federal marshal is on his way here now." Silas Ford's smile went thin. "You are bluffing. I lost 5 men in a stampede 3 weeks back," Cole said. "I have not slept well since. I am not in a bluffing mood, Silas. I am in a mood to see one thing through correctly before I sit down again. You have 1 gun and a bad leg." "I have," Cole said, 7 witnesses inside that house. 6 of them are children who watched you send men to kill their father. One of them is a woman whose brother is a circuit judge in Denver. And I have the paper. The real one. Their father's actual will, which their mother sewed into the lining of a coat before she died, and which Sarah Beth has kept next to her skin for a month. It leaves the land to those children, not to you." Silas Ford's face changed then. It changed the way a river changes when the ice underneath goes. "You cannot prove." "I do not need to prove it here," Cole said. "I only need to keep you standing in this yard for another 40 minutes. Because that is when the marshal gets to the top of that ridge behind you." Every rider in the yard turned to look at the ridge. There was no one on it yet, but there would be. Cole had sent Isaac 3 days back on the gray gelding with a sealed letter and 11 silver dollars. And Isaac was 10 years old, and Isaac had not failed him. At minute 38, a dust plume appeared on the ridge. At minute 40, 6 riders crested it, and the sun caught on the badge on the lead man's coat. And Silas Ford, who had never in his life been told no in a way that stuck, was told no in a way that would stick for the rest of the very short remaining part of his life as a free man. They took him in irons off his own horse. They took his 8 men with him. The paper Sarah Beth had carried against her skin was read in a federal court in Denver 2 months later, and the land came back to the Halloran children and the rest of Silas Ford's land. Every acre he had taken by fire and forgery over 11 years was returned to the families he had taken it from, and what could not be returned was sold, and the money went into a trust for the children he had orphaned. He died in a territorial prison 18 months later of a bad heart, which everyone who had known him agreed was the correct organ to fail. But that was later. That night, after the marshal had ridden off with his prisoners, Cole Merrick sat on the porch step with his bad leg out straight, and Hannah Prine sat down beside him, and neither of them said anything for a long time. "I meant to build my mother a porch," Cole said finally. "This is a porch, Cole. It is not the one I promised." "It is the one you are sitting on," she said. With me, which is more than either of us was counting on a month ago. He took her hand. It was the first time he had touched her in 7 years. Her hand was rough from the axe and warm from the day, and it fit into his the way a thing fits when it has been carved for the space. Inside the house, baby Ellie was laughing at something little John had said. It was the first time Cole had heard the baby laugh. He closed his eyes and listened to it, and Hannah felt him shake once, very slightly, and she did not say anything, because there was nothing to add to that. Strange, she said, after a while, almost to herself, how the things you've given up on tend to find you. He didn't respond. There was nothing to add to that either. They were married in the fall, in Adeline Merrick's yard, under an aspen going gold. Sarah Beth stood as witness. Isaac gave Hannah away, which he insisted on with the solemnity of a boy who had ridden 3 days alone across territory to save a family and had decided, on that ride, that he was a man now. The twins scattered petals from Adeline's last summer roses. Little John carried the ring on a folded square of blue cloth. Baby Ellie sat on Adeline's hip and pulled the old woman's hair and was forgiven. Cole limped through the ceremony on his hickory cane. He did not mind the limp. The limp was the price of being alive, and being alive was the price of being here, and being here was worth any price he could think of. 5 years passed. The porch got built. Cole built it himself, over 3 summers, with Isaac beside him swinging a smaller hammer that grew, year by year, into a larger one. Adeline lived to sit on it. She died on a Tuesday in April of her 81st year, in her sleep, with sun on her face and baby Ellie, no longer a baby, a solemn dark-eyed girl of 8, reading to her from the Book of Psalms. Adeline's last words, to Ellie, were, "Keep going, honey, I want to hear the end." Sarah Beth grew tall. She grew into the jaw she had been born with, and it looked right on her now. She rode into Trinidad at 17 to sit for the teacher's examination, and she passed it, and she came home and opened a one-room school in the old bunkhouse, and the children of every family Silas Ford had ever tried to break sent their sons and daughters to sit in it. Isaac grew into his father's shoulders and his own quiet mind. He read law by lamplight for 6 years and became, in time, the circuit judge for 3 counties. He was known for never raising his voice and never losing a case he cared about. The twins married brothers, which no one was surprised about, and lived on adjoining pieces of land, and their children ran between the 2 houses as if the fence line were a suggestion. Little John became a horse trainer of some regional fame. He carried, always, a small lopsided whittled horse in his shirt pocket, over his heart. When people asked him what it was for, he would only say, "Reminds me." Baby Ellie became a doctor, the first woman doctor in her county. She said, when asked, that she had decided on the profession the night she watched a 12-year-old girl set a stranger's leg by firelight and understood that healing was something a person could choose to do. And Cole and Hannah had 2 children of their own, a boy named Micah for a man who had told a joke around a fire, and a girl named Adeline for the woman who had opened her kitchen without a second's hesitation. They raised 8 children in that house. Every one of them made it to grown. On a summer evening in 1893, an old man sat on a porch in southeastern Colorado with his wife's hand in his own. His leg still ached where it had healed crooked, and the cane he used was still the same hickory branch, worn smooth now by 40 years of his palm. In the yard, 3 of his grandchildren were chasing fireflies, and a woman he had once nursed back to life was calling them in for supper, and behind him, through the open door, he could hear the twins arguing amiably about a recipe and little John laughing at something and baby Ellie, Dr. Halloran, now, telling her mother to sit down and let someone else do the biscuits for once. Cole Merrick had lost his whole crew in a stampede on the Prairie River on a night in 1873. 6 children had walked out of the smoke and found him half dead in the mud. He had been trying, ever since, to figure out what he had done to deserve them. He had never quite worked it out, but he had stopped worrying about the arithmetic of it a long time ago. Hannah leaned her head against his shoulder. The fireflies came up out of the grass in their slow gold thousands. Somewhere a whip-poor-will started its evening call, and somewhere farther off, a horse whinnied, and the sun went down soft as a hand closing over a candle. He had built her the porch. He had built it 100 times over. He was sitting on it now. Next time, we'll tell you the story of a widow who inherited nothing but her husband's debts and a half-blind stagecoach horse. and the outlaw who rode into her yard on the worst night of her life and asked if she could spare a bowl of soup. Stay with us. We'll be here when you come back.